All right, and welcome to the latest installment of the Afterparty. It is your boy, Jay Connor, and to remind you guys what the Afterparty is, it's a succinct 20-minute reaction to major moments in pop culture, award shows, television events, whatever the fuck's going on that's beautiful and Black. Today, in this particular instance, however, since we're on the cusp of one of the greatest moments in Black cinematic history, I wanted to provide those of you who are unfamiliar with this character and this universe with some context and mythos so you don't go into this movie not knowing what the hell is going on. And to help me with that today, I'm joined by my homeboy who, much like myself, is all about this comic books life. So superstar scribe, Mr. Ware, whose work you've read over at The Root, Very Smart Brothers, New York Times, Slate, and Your Mama's Bedroom. Welcome to the show.
Your mama's bedroom, nigga, you crazy.
All right, so who is the Black Panther and what separates him from more traditional Black superheroes?
Well, really, first of all, the Black Panther is the first superhero in a major kind of comic. And so the two major kind of comic book houses are Marvel and DC. He came around in 1966 in the Fantastic Four. And he predates people like John Stewart over as Green Lantern with DC. He really predates everyone. And so him being the first, that really makes him, really significant. And one of the things that's really interesting to me about Black Panther is the fact that he is a king. So he's royalty and he's king of this African nation called Wakanda. And what's fascinating about Wakanda for me is the fact that Wakanda is essentially, as I kind of think about it, it's a country without the touch of white supremacy, because it doesn't require interacting with these other countries, and they haven't been colonized because they are self-sustaining, because they are the home of vibranium, this metal that's able to absorb the vibrations, anything that kind of hits it. And so everyone has to go to Wakanda to get the vibranium. And so that puts it in a powerful position. And so therefore, it's not been colonized. It's essentially untouched by white supremacy, which is really fascinating and opens the door for a lot of interesting kind of thought experiments about what does it mean to be Black in a country where white supremacy touches everything else around you, but it does not touch you directly.
Word. I think that's one of the things that drew me the most to the character and the country of Wakanda, and the fact that this is a country that's never been colonized. And I think what's really dope is that Chadwick Boseman specifically said that in creating the dialect around Black Panther, that's something that he wanted to highlight, as opposed to having kind of like a westernized, sound like he's from like New York or some shit. Like he sounds like a nigga that's never fuck with these white folks on that level and colonization on that level. So I think that's supremely dope.
Well, I also think that what's interesting is that not only is it untouched, but it's also the most technologically, advanced country in the world. And so America's looking at Wakanda, trying to be like Wakanda technologically, right? France and the UK, all these white countries are looking at Wakanda. And so it's just a fascinating kind of set of affairs. And so that's why it's interesting to me that Stan Lee and his inker came up with the idea for Black Panther, because it's amazing. I would imagine that coming out of Black folks, but for these two Jewish, guys to come up with this idea is really fascinating. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, I should have known that.
I was about to say Jack Kirby, yeah.
Yeah, Jack Kirby, the artist. So,
although it's debatable if Stan Lee created him, but that's an entirely different conversation.
That's a whole different conversation. and also there's this kind of debate about where the idea where the name comes from, and the name Black Panther predates the 1967 forming of that group. Although, there's been debate about whether or not, they kind of heard the rumblings of the name Black Panther, and so therefore kind of picked up on that. But nevertheless, it's just a fascinating kind of biography. But just the idea of Black Panther is fascinating, and it opens the door for all kinds of discussions about what does it mean to be Black when you don't have this kind of imprint of white supremacy upon you, which is why Eric Killmonger, who is his nemesis, is a really interesting kind of character as well.
All right. Yeah, we're going to talk about him in a minute, but you touched on this briefly, but just about everybody who's going to see this movie knows about, or, knows of the fictional African nature of Wakanda. But what separates Wakanda from its neighboring African countries?
Well, as I said, it is untouched by white supremacy. It has not been colonized. In fact, a major kind of reoccurring theme in the comic book, and I'm sure will be a theme in the movie, is just the continued attempts to protect Wakanda from outside influences.
Yes.
And just this notion of Wakanda being this place that is special and needs to be protected. And oftentimes, I mean, white, outside influences is just kind of a code word for whiteness. Right, making sure that Wakanda is not beholden to any country, that they're technologically advanced, that they are extremely financially self-sufficient, and then beyond that, just the notion that they don't have this kind of troubled history. Because oftentimes, what happens when you're colonized by these other countries, by these European countries, that that leaves in that wake this internal conflict and war. And so the notion of a genocide, for example, happening in Wakanda would be essentially unthinkable because there is no kind of white supremacy there that would divide them, although there is going to be issues with that, as I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Yeah, there's it's just such an interesting, the entire mythology surrounding Black Panther is just such an interesting allegory. It's almost kind of like an inverse of what we actually know as Black Americans. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like the complete opposite of everything. So I think that's part of the reason why people are so drawn by this, and part of the reason why a narrative of this nature requires a $200 million budget. So to your point that you were about to get on, behind every successful Black man is an even stronger Black woman. And Black Panther is no different. That being said, who are the Dora Milaje, and what significance does his younger sister Shuri have to Wakandan mythology?
Well, I mean, there's a lot there. So let's start with his sister. So his sister Shuri is the only daughter of T'Chaka, who was his father. And so Shuri is his younger sister. Now, within the context of the comics, Shuri has always wanted to take up the mantle of the Black Panther, but of course she was disallowed because her brother took it up. Well, yeah, there was a storyline that happened where her brother was unable to do it, and so therefore she took up the mantle very briefly. But she's a person who is incredibly intelligent, very smart. I believe within the context of the MCU, of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, she is going to be the smartest person in the world, even more intelligent than Tony Stark. But she's someone who they have a typical kind of sibling relationship where he's the bigger brother, she's the younger sister, and there's this kind of internal conflict, but they are, without question, very devoted to one another, deeply in love with one another. And, she is kind of the essence of what it means to be the strong younger sister. Now, when it comes to the Dora, say the name. I've never been able to say their names properly.
Dora Milaje.
Say it one more time. You say it so good. Say it one more time.
Say it one time for the soul. Dora Milaje.
They are a team of women who are the special forces for Wakanda. And so they are the really military force, as well as kind of the Secret Service. They're his drivers, they're his protectors, they are his confidants. They're the ones who are the leaders as far as the military, which is a fascinating idea to have women who are your military leaders, who are the ones who are charged with taking care of the national security of Wakanda. Just a fascinating idea. I absolutely love the idea. And of course, they were thought up by Christopher Priest and Mark Teixeira.
Yo, Christopher Priest put in such work on Black Panther, man. He really was the Marriage to Storm during his run too?
I think so. I want to say yeah.
Homeboy put in work, man. Shout out to him.
Yeah. Him and Reggie Hudlin, of course. Reggie Hudlin was very important. Yeah. Reggie came after.
Yeah, you know what? I think it was during Reggie Hudlin's run that Storm and him got married. But
I always get confused on that, because I know that Christopher Priest did all the work kind of laying the ground as far as building the world, but Reggie Hudlin really kind of took it in a different direction and really kind of expanded to the modern Black Panther that we know now. And of course, Coates has taken over now, and he's doing interesting things with it as well.
Interesting is definitely interesting, especially how he rewrote like the history of it, which was a big controversy. We don't want to, I'm trying not to completely dork out, but since that's kind of the premise of what this is about and telling you about the mythology of Black Panther prior to watching the movie, there's been a lot of controversy because the reason why Wakanda is such a big deal is that it's, self-sufficient. It's never been colonized. And recently, Ta-Nehisi Coates rewrote like the history and the backstory of Wakanda to mean that there was actually, the Black people came in after, I think it was aliens.
Yeah, it was aliens.
Like aliens kind of like laid the groundwork, and then Black folks built off that. And so niggas are incensed at that shit. Like, damn, we can't have shit. You know what I'm saying?
That's frustrating to me because it takes, the reason why it's frustrating and why I say it's interesting, and I'm not trying to throw no shade at the brother, but with all due respect, that's how you know some disrespectful stuff's about to happen. With all due respect, what he's doing is he's saying that Black folks can't do it by themselves.
Not
right?
enough.
That we need some extraterrestrial help in order to kind of achieve these kind of incredible things. And part of what was so brilliant about the initial kind of envisioning of Black Panther is that it was Black folks, right? It was just the idea that if you give Black folks a chance, then we can do these amazing things.
Yeah.
And the moment you begin to kind of say, well, there's magic happening, or there's this alien technology that's happening, well, then it takes it out of Black people's hands, and it's because of this other thing. And so it's frustrating, it's interesting, but I'm hoping that he'll kind of get that together.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
If not, we can just retcon that shit out and pretend it never happened.
Listen, man, that's the history of comics, man. The history of comics is killing somebody and bringing them back somehow.
That's real.
Or something happened and then we change the timeline. So we can figure it out. We can get this together now.
That's real. So Michael B. Jordan of Creed and Fruitvale Station fame plays Black Panther's ashy antagonist, Eric Killmonger.
Why the nigga gotta be ashy? He looked incredibly moisturized to me.
We're going to get to that in a second. What is it about Killmonger that makes him the perfect adversary for T'Challa? I'm sorry, T'Challa is Black Panther's real name. I didn't clarify that earlier.
Right. Well, within the context of the comics, he is a native of Wakanda. And then when Claw, who is one of Black Panther's main adversaries, when he attacks Wakanda, when Claw attacks Wakanda, he pressures Eric Killmonger's father into joining them. Now, when that attack fails, Killmonger's father is killed. And because of his father participating in this attack, he is then exiled. Well, when he's exiled, he goes to, I believe it's Harlem, because everybody goes to Harlem. He goes to Harlem, and like it's like the only place that comic book writers know is Harlem. Like,
Dog,
everything happens in Harlem.
If Harlem is not the damn Black Mecca in the Marvel universe, bruh, go ahead, though. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
Nah, you good. I mean, in the same way that like Kansas is the Mecca for white folks, because, Superman's from Kansas. Anyway, he goes to Harlem. He gets educated. I think he got 2 PhDs from MIT. I think one of them is business, and another's like engineering or something. I think I can't remember.
Yeah.
But he gets 2 PhDs. He then comes back to Wakanda. He's allowed to come back, and then he begins to start a revolution. And what he wants to do is he wants to get rid of all kinds of outside influences in Wakanda. So in other words, he wants to get rid of the white colonial influence that he thinks is beginning to happen. He wants to take Wakanda back to their original ancient ways, which I'm sure is why you called him ashy, because there is kind of a subtext of Hotepism that's happening there.
Just a little.
It's a little Hotepism.
A little Dr. Umar.
Look, his lips are ashy, but everything else looks moisturized. But anyway, so the idea though is that that's what he wants to do, is he wants to take this back to this original thing. And ultimately what happens is that he fails, he's killed, and then he dies, but then Mandarin claims his body and brings him back to life. But what he is the kind of perfect nemesis, because he also has peak strength. He also has martial arts training. He's also incredibly intelligent. But he also has at least within the context of, depending upon the run of the comics and within the context of the movie, he's also going to have this access to this kind of suit that is similar to what T'Challa wears.
Yeah.
Although that is, depending upon the storyline in the comic, that that may or may not be the truth.
We're going to find out together, nigga. We going to see.
We going to see, man. We going to see.
All right. Now, from top to bottom, this cast is absolutely bananas. Outside of hurling confetti and squealing with glee, how did you react when you learned about who all was involved in this project?
Yo, man, you seen that GIF where my man was like, I'm Black, y'all. That's how I responded, man. Yo, I got
Alan Payne. Yeah.
Yeah. That Alan Payne was it from CB4? Yeah, man. I immediately just ordered my dashiki, and I already had one, so I got a new one. So what's amazing about this is that it's essentially like a Black all-star cast. Like everybody who's Black and who's been in anything. I mean, you got my homeboy from Get Out who's in the film. You got Michael B. Jordan. You got Angela Bassett. You got Forrest Whitaker. You got everybody that's in this film. It's just an incredible pedigree. And then you have Ryan Coogler, who I would argue is one of the most exciting up and coming filmmakers.
Man,
like his way of moving the camera And it's very, like, you can see it in the way that he films, like the action scenes in Creed, right? Where the fight is happening and the camera's moving away and then it comes back. And so I've seen some scenes from Black Panther and he does that. Like the camera's almost like floating above the action, but it's also involved in the, he just has an amazing eye and an amazing way to move the camera. And so what you have here is both great, actors and actresses, but also great filmmakers who are involved. Yeah. That it sent me over the moon. I'm excited because it's the like, I enjoyed, Meteor Man, but it's not the best made film, right? And I love Robert Townsend,
Fam.
but
Fam, did you really just compare Meteor Man to fucking?
No, man, it's a black superhero film, dude. Like, what you want me to say?
Well, Blank Man was too, if we're gonna go that far. But go ahead, I'll let you finish.
Blank Man is making fun of superhero films. Meteor Man is trying to be a superhero film. Like, come on. Like, Blank Man's had an orgasm when he got kissed, dog. Anyway, but the idea... But yo, I mean, it's all this money. And I gotta be honest, like, I'm suspicious of corporations, and it's something that I wrote about in a piece that's coming out soon. I am suspicious of corporations like commercializing wokeness and using that as a means to kind of like help their bottom line and having no meaningful kind of investment in blackness. And so that's something that makes me feel icky and it makes me feel uncomfortable. Yeah. But I'm just absolutely excited about this. And it really, really kind of lets us know that this is a moment that is really unique in American history.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of this being a big moment in, history, this is the first big budget, predominantly black movie that's ever been created, which is an insane thing to say in 2018, but that's just real shit. And it's just a constant reminder that parity does not exist in the entertainment industry, no matter how badly they try to push these shallow diversity initiatives. A lot of it's just smoke and mirrors. But what about this film are you most looking forward to?
Quite honestly, I'm looking forward to the visuals. I'm looking forward to the way that Ryan Coogler is going to, because I'm a film nerd, man. In addition to being like a comic book nerd, I'm also a film nerd. I teach a class having to do with film and film theory.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in the way that Ryan Coogler is going to direct this, because just the way that he moves the camera is fascinating to me, and the way that he tells a story is fascinating. And I'm also interested in all of the things from the comic books. I'm interested in what are they going to use? Like what are they going to use? What are they going to do away with? I'm also interested in what they're going to do with Eric Killmonger, because he could be the greatest villain that Marvel has ever had, because Marvel has a villain problem. Over and over and over again in their films, they don't really do service to the motivations of the villain. Like, the only one that has been decent was Michael Keaton as the Vulture.
Yeah.
I would argue that everyone else has really kind of been, like, underwhelming.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested to see what Michael B. Jordan is going to do with that character, because he said that he drew from inspiration from Heath Ledger as the Joker, as well as from Michael Fassbender as Magneto. And so I'm interested to see what he's going to do. And I really hope that they don't kill him off at the end. Like, I hope they send him back to Harlem or something like that, because I want him to turn up later on. And they can send him to Oklahoma, anything. But like, I want them to send him somewhere, because I want to see Michael B. Jordan again in this franchise, because he's such a strong actor.
Yeah. When I sit there and I try to think about like what it is about this movie that I'm most excited about and what it is that I'm most looking forward to seeing, honestly, I'm just super amped to see, like, because representation is such, as somebody who's in the entertainment industry, representation is such a constant struggle. I mean, I was at a premiere last night, and that was one of the underlying themes of like how dope it is when there's nuance, when you have black actors with black writers, with black directors, and everybody there's certain things that are just intrinsic to our experience that can't be replicated. They can't, it's in our DNA. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not something you can fake through, writing and like, oh, I have a black friend. I know how, like, no, there's just certain things there's just certain nuances and just, being familiar with everything that's going on surrounding this film, as far as having black actors, black director and everything else. I am just, and the budget, I'm just really looking forward to seeing what does a big budget black movie look like? Cause we've never experienced this before. We have literally no context and no preface of what the fuck this looks like. We've never experienced this before. I mean, we've been doing so much with less for so long. You know, you look at like, I mean, quality's never been a problem, but it's just like when you look at like movies like Get Out, they did that off what, like $2 million? You know what I'm saying? It's like we've always had to do more with less. And sometimes you just always feel like, damn, well, what if we got the money they had? Imagine what the fuck we can create. And now we get to see what that looks like. And like I said, as somebody who's in this industry, who is a writer, who's actively working on different projects and things of that nature. Like, I just can't wait to see what that experience looks like. And I want to feel how white kids feel when they see Iron Man. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to, you know what I'm saying? Like, I want to have that joy and like, oh, wow, look at that major explosion. And this is from somebody that looks like me. You know what I'm saying? But most importantly, it's imperative. And I mean, this movie is already killing it in pre-sales, but I'm very curious in seeing if this means that people will start opening the wallet for Black movies and, you know, bigger budgets. Because I mean, TV is TV. Yeah, it kind of is what it is. But if this movie, you know, between this, Girls Trip, and a couple others that did that, Get Out is another example of movies that just killed it in the box office. I'm very curious to see if this shifts the paradigm to where it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe instead of giving Jordan Peele, you know, 20 million, maybe we'll give him 60 for his next movie. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Right. So I'm very, there's a lot riding on this, and it's beautiful to see all these insane, because I didn't even know advanced pre-sales of tickets was a thing. I just really thought niggas just showed up at the theater and just went to see the shit. I had no idea that, like, I mean, you might feel differently, but I didn't know niggas bought tickets in advance. I mean, this is like a whole entirely brand new concept to me, barring it being like fucking Star Wars or some shit. Like, I've never heard of people buying tickets in advance to go see this, to see any movie. So to see that people are going in droves and we're demonstrating the power of the Black dollar, it's just beautiful, man. It's just a beautiful thing to witness.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, typically pre-sales are for those bigger films. Like, I mean, so you'll get pre-sales for like Star Wars, and you have to stand in line.
Yeah.
But it's for those kinds of films. And so for it to be like a Marvel film, I mean, Marvel has always done pre-sales, but it's never been like this big usually, right? It's usually not this big, I should say. Yeah. And so it's tracking big. Well, one of the things that I am interested in is the longevity, because the opening weekend is going to be big, but I'm also fascinated to see, are people going to go back and see it, right? Yeah. And are they going to see it in IMAX? And as I was thinking as you were talking, one thing that really does hit home for me about what I'm fascinated to see, and excited to see, rather, I should say, is not only what's going to happen as far as the film is concerned, but my son LJ, who's named after me, Lawrence Jr. Yeah. He is like amped, dog. Like he got dreads now because he saw Eric Killmonger's dreads.
That's dope.
You know, he's running around reading Black Panther comics and books, and I'm excited to be able to experience that with him, because, like, you know, as I said earlier, what we had was Meteor Man and Blank Man. You know, and as we went into high school, we had Blade, you know, but for it to be this big, this much money, this Black, I am excited to be raising my son at this time, dude.
Yeah. I mean, you know, my kid is only 3, so he's way too young to appreciate something like this. But I mean, the fact that he's going to grow up in a world in which this could very well be normal is something that's encouraging, because we grew up like, oh shit, Luke Cage, cool. We saw him in this one episode, like, or this one issue, cool. Mm-hmm. Or the fucking Falcon, who I never give a damn about. You know, he got to hang out with Captain, you know what I mean? So the fact that this could set the and this can become the norm, kind of like how we have kids who grew up not knowing what it was like to have a white president, that these are very real things, or have the potential to be very real things. Now, for anybody else who's going to go see this film, is there anything else that people who are unfamiliar with the comic book that you feel like they should know prior to watching this film?
Yeah, I think that the film is drawing on a lot of different inspirations. And so there's this thing called Afrofuturism, which is essentially like culture and ideas that kind of envision what it means to be Black in the future, this radical idea that Black people will survive, the present, and be there in the future, and how will they live, and how will they kind of interact with the world, and how will they see themselves. So this notion of Afrofuturism is something that I think people should be kind of thinking about. And if you have time between now and then, kind of read up on Afrofuturism. In fact, I wrote an article for the Black Youth Project that kind of talks about this. And so Afrofuture, you can find it in hip hop and things like AT Aliens. You can find it in literature and stuff like works by Octavia Butler and whatnot. But also, I think that people should be kind of reading up on more than that. I mean, you can also read up on Black fantasy.
Word.
You can read up on just all the things that are kind of going on around the film, the ideas that are influencing the film, so that, you should, of course, read the comics if you can, but there's so much that's going on around the film that I think will be really good to kind of have in the back of your mind so that you can engage the stuff that's happening in the film on a much deeper level.
Yeah. And for people like, Law kind of alluded to it before, but definitely check out that article that he wrote over at Black Youth Project that literally lists 10 things that you need. Was it 10 or 15?
That's 10.
10,
yeah.
10 things that you need to consume to kind of get your mind and your soul right prior to watching this. It's a dope ass article, much like everything else he puts together. So, Law, thank you for coming through. Where can people find you in these internet streets?
Yo, man, you can find me on Twitter at law_rights. You can holler at me on Instagram at law.rights. Yo, just get at your boy.
Word. And as always, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts. Tune in. We're featured all month on both of those platforms. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. And yeah, thank y'all for listening. Subscribe if you haven't already. And go watch this movie, man. It's going to be crazy. Peace out.
And go back multiple times. Holler at your boy. Be easy.
Word.